Byron finished his exchange with Roan and dropped his blade to his side. 2 months of this effort had yielded fewer results than Byron had hoped to achieve. As he tried to force breath into his lungs, Byron cursed his luck that his teacher Caitlin Cass hadn't been able to teach him swordsmanship. Caitlin and Byron had worked for 3 years together, and though Byron was quite an accomplished and dedicated martial artist, the last 2 months had proved to him that he lacked a significant piece of his self-defense and combat knowledge. He finally caught his breath and raised the blade again, as Roan seemed at ease with the wordless sparring that Byron appreciated. After several more clashes of their blades, Byron dropped his once again, turning his back to hide the frustration that was building. This was so foreign to him. It was a language he didn't understand or have any feel for. Roan Astor had trained with weapons since he was 10 years old, so he had nearly a decade on Byron. Roan had learned very quickly not to break the silence Byron imposed. If he did, it would take nearly an hour to relax Byron's high-strung nature. Roan watched as Byron slid his sword into its sheath, carefully placing the sword next to his folded cloak and armor. Then the young man slid down along the wall of the training room until he was sitting down with his legs stretched out in front of him. Roan followed suit moments later, bringing himself down quietly, hoping Byron would break the silence. Instead, the prince decided to drink from a water flask and then offered Roan some. Roan declined his offer of water with a polite shake of his head.
Damn it. I've been at this for weeks.
Byron paused to finish drinking and put away his flask.
I'm still not getting this.
Roan didn't quite know how to deal with Byron's frustration. His attempts over the last few weeks of encouragement seemed to have fallen on deaf ears as Byron's attitude worsened with the lack of progress. He decided instead to take a slightly different angle with the young prince.
You need to figure out this isn't something you can just learn through with brute strength. You need patient aggression.
Keeping his face forward, Roan continued.
Your defense and counter swordsmanship are solid. Not great, but well ahead of where most tend to struggle.
They both sat in further silence, letting Roan's advice hang in the air for a couple of minutes, their breaths evening as they finally fully relaxed from training. Byron took another drink from his flask, then drew his palm across his forehead.
Maybe we should try something else.
The way he said it, Roan wasn't sure Byron wanted to offer this thought at all. Instead of pushing him, Roan decided to offer an invitation to speak freely.
What else could we do?
Well, my master wasn't fond of this. See, my power isn't strength and speed alone. You were there when I spoke to that refugee woman. I spoke another language I've never even heard before. The truth is, I know things I have no way of knowing. How to build things, how to speak languages, all kinds of things.
How will this help us with your training?
When I was 11, it first manifested. It was like I had 1,000 different thoughts all at once. For almost a year, my father tried to help, and that's when he finally brought me to my master, Caitlin Cass. She taught me meditation and focus. It was brilliant. I began to understand my ability.
Byron started to stand up.
I call it the all-mind. It's like having hundreds of books inside of my head.
Byron retrieved his sword from its sheath. Roan got up and followed Byron's lead.
Just so you know, this glowy eye thing is creepy as hell.
That might not be the biggest negative to this. According to my master, prolonged usage of my ability can result in severe confusion and loss of identity for days, like some kind of amnesia.
Byron's smile, with his creepy glowing eyes focused on Roan, unsettled the man even more.
Risk and reward, am I right?
Picking up his sword, Byron took his stance and waited for Roan to follow him. Once he did, Byron initiated the first clash of their blades. Then a quick flurry of clashes occurred. Byron and Roan focused bitterly on the task as their blades struck. The smile Byron had earlier dissipated into a tight line. Roan was still easily repelling the attacks. Byron was attempting to match his movements, and as the clash continued, Roan could tell that the power Byron was using was allowing him to make decisions. He wasn't anticipating, he was just responding with better answers. Eventually, Roan held up a hand.
Stop, it's not working. You're still just technical. You lack the instinct, even with the knowledge, Byron.
Byron's face turned stern, and then the light faded from his eyes as the prince slid his sword back into its sheath, which he tied onto his belt. He nodded to Roan.
I appreciate your honesty. I may have to accept that I just don't have what it takes for the sword and weapon stuff after all.
Maybe not, but I'll keep working if you want to stay at it. I should call it a day now, though. We've been at this for a while, and my body isn't as durable as yours.
That's true. Maybe we should take a day or two for you to recover.
That's probably a good idea. Where are you off to now?
I have to go see Elizabeth, actually. She's training new recruits, so she's combining her time with me and these new people.
That's tough. Don't you normally see her after you work with Tyrus?
Yeah, it breaks up the physical training parts, but I have no choice today.
What does Tyrus work with you on anyway?
Strategy and complex thinking, leadership stuff. Apparently it's important.
He's good at those problem-type games. What is it he always says?
5 moves ahead. The average opponent thinks 3 moves ahead, so be that much better.
Byron turned to look at Roan, who had become like a friend to him these past couple of months, and smiled.
So in the end, be that much better. Has a dramatic pause between each word for greater effect.
I love that guy.
Roan patted Byron on the back, guiding him out of the empty room they had used for their duels these last few months, and took him just short of the threshold to the outside where the bitter cold of winter waited to greet them.
Take care, kid. I'll see you here after Christmas.
Oh yeah, that's happening. See ya. Time to go get my butt kicked by Elizabeth.
This is Arkneo Masato, and you're listening to Shepherd, Journey of the Time Walker.
Sometime later, Byron watched as the recruits battled in front of him. He wasn't really paying much attention as he stood back against the wall with his arms crossed, next to Elizabeth, who was watching with much more interest. Byron did notice that she elected to wear a cloth over her face to hide her pure white eyes. Normally she taught Byron one-on-one with her eyes unhidden. She said she liked to keep her opponents unsettled. He wanted to protest this decision, but elected not to. He knew if it upset her, she would probably make him pay for it.
See? This is what I'm struggling with.
Byron shrugged his shoulders to show his lack of understanding, and then instantly realizing the mistake, spoke instead.
What do you mean?
Watch them. The men won't fight at full strength, and the women, they're just trying to prove their strength to them. They're wasting time.
Did you try telling them that?
Of course I did. They don't understand what I'm saying.
Or they aren't like...
Byron cut his words short when she looked his way. Despite the cloth hiding her eyes, the rest of her face showed her irritation at the words he was about to utter.
Sorry.
That's why I called you here early. I need an example.
Oh, great. Ground rules?
Illustrate. No actual contact until I say.
Sure.
Byron felt his nerves surge to life as he watched Elizabeth walk toward the recruits, preparing to stop them. He only felt it increase when her voice boomed.
Okay, that's enough. I've tried for a week to get you broken so we can prepare you for basic training. Unfortunately, you have not understood me and continue to waste my time. I'm at the end. So at my end right now. I've trained many before, but you are impressively stubborn.
Elizabeth didn't blame them entirely. These recruits were young by more than a few years when compared to Byron. They weren't that much younger than Elizabeth had been used to working with, but the inexperience was taking its toll. With a conflict with Jaken and his forces on the horizon, it had been a difficult 2 months of preparation. Byron related to that. With weapons training, strategy, and then close-quarters combat, the days were a grind just to stay engaged. He didn't mind a slight shake-up of his training day. It was a welcome and small reprieve from the stale life he was living presently.
Byron, come stand here, please.
Byron did as instructed, placing his hands together behind his back and taking an even stance as his master Cass had taught him to.
This is my assistant, Byron. He's going to help demonstrate what I've been trying to instruct, which all of you have so masterfully avoided to learn. It's not that complicated, despite your results thus far.
She turned to Byron and smirked.
Freestyle.
She paused and her smirk exploded into a smile. Byron tensed again.
Full contact.
Byron swore under his breath and barely had the chance to pick a stance before she was on the attack. He gritted his teeth as she met him full force with quick blows. She never lingered when she scored a hit, so it was hard to keep up with her next move. Byron learned quickly that Oren didn't do anything without a purpose. For her, a blow landed was simply about an opportunity to control her opponent rather than being the decisive blow. She described it simply,
I don't want to put all my power in one strike, because if it fails, I lose.
Byron saw the value of it now. Without the benefit of relying on his strength, he found he had a lot more to learn when it came to combat and fighting styles. It was depressing to him that 3 years of training was so easily combated on one hand, but he was excited for his potential on the other. Other than a few grunts and sounds of combat, there was no talking between them. Byron thought that was odd since this was supposed to be a training exercise. Byron felt himself drift into the combat and away from the fact that there was an audience for this. Not that it bothered him. His father, Varric, and others had watched his training with Cass, so this was not a new sensation. Just as he settled into a groove, Elizabeth Oren spoke with a commanding tone so close to his face he was unsettled deeply.
I want you female students to watch this exchange. None of these blows are about proving my strength. They aren't a statement. Their only purpose?
Again, Byron tensed. In the next 3 moves, he was on his butt looking up at the face of his teacher who stood over him.
Is to win.
As his teacher helped him up, Byron swallowed his frustration. He had still not bested her in training. Sure, he could use his strength and speed to outdo her easily, but the learning he was doing was well worth the hit to his pride. The class went on for a little while longer, but the distraction of Byron's appearance and then the demonstration was clearly making it impossible to settle the trainees back into the flow. Elizabeth dismissed them all and then walked out with Byron into the cold, snow-covered courtyard.
I hope that little exchange was able to help.
Byron wasn't too sure that it would, but he knew why he had to help. Elizabeth couldn't get hands-on with her recruits. She was a shepherd, and because of that she had strength and durability beyond humans. Training them while also having to hold back could make her be seen as potentially weak.
Also, if you need further examples, I did leave my dignity in there. If you need to thrash it again.
They both smiled.
I hope I don't need to do that again.
They walked some distance toward the center of the fort, where the tower that oversaw the desert expanse stood as a frozen reminder of what could be coming.
I haven't asked in all this time because I've just been trying to survive, but how did you learn to fight like that?
Elizabeth smiled, and Byron detected a slight blush when he asked.
Your brother taught me. I was a thief, abandoned by my family when I was 4. They just left me at Fort William and went on with their lives. I survived by stealing at first, and then, after the people of the fort took me in as one of their own, I kept stealing because I liked it, and I made people upset. Your brother said I was doing it to get attention, probably because I got his. We met because I stole his shirt from a clothing line. You know how much he loves his shirts.
Byron felt the admiration in her voice as she spoke.
This is going to sound stupid, but he made me return the shirt and go with him to dinner. I wasn't even upset. He talked to me about what I was. For hours he told me things about what I could do, but most of the time I didn't care. Because he was talking to me, and I didn't care about what it was. Eventually he said I needed to learn combat skills if I wanted to be a thief, but by then, I gave it up. He trained me to unlock the potential of my powers. I didn't need to steal for attention or to hurt people anymore. I made them respect me. After that, I was always eager to prove to everyone that everything was about winning.
She looked at Byron, her smile enhancing her features.
I stole it from Ben.
So technically, you're still a thief then?
Yeah, I guess so.
She put her arm around Byron's shoulders.
Come on. I'll buy you a warm cider and then you can go see Tyrus. This is Diana Corona, and you're listening to Shepherd, Journey of the Time Walker.
A few hours later, Byron leaned back in his chair across the small round table from Tyrus Clade. This had become the worst part of his training days. Despite having earned stalemates in most of the games and scenarios put forth by Tyrus, Byron could tell that he was not pleased with the result. Varric had sat down with both of them before Tyrus had really agreed to help Byron. He helped set the baseline for these scenarios Byron was trying to solve. Byron felt the most insecure here because his father William had constantly worked with him on problem-solving and battle scenarios. He should have been in his element, but he wasn't.
No risk? No unpredictability? You couldn't turn a battle if I showed you all the steps to take.
I don't think that way. That's not how I am.
That doesn't matter, and I really do not care. You're supposed to be a leader. You will have to be if we're going to challenge Jaken's attack. You don't have a choice. Your powers mean you determine the fate of those around you.
Byron tried to fight the tension. Then he felt yet another feeling rush in to take its place. Rage.
I know what I'm supposed to be, but I can't just throw people away.
We're not asking you to.
What is it then? Risk on the scale you're talking about would mean hundreds die.
You won't even propose any risks, so how can you judge that?
Tyrus folded his hands just under his nose, his elbows sitting firmly on the table.
I'm just saying.
I don't want to hear it again.
Byron's face screwed up. He couldn't contain his frustration at the cool exterior of Tyrus's dark face set against the soft glow of torches. When the man looked up with his disapproving gaze, Byron snapped. He lifted the table and pieces of their scenario flew up towards Tyrus's face. Then, still consumed by rage and helplessness, he tilted the table, causing it to press into Tyrus's hips. Byron suddenly woke from the rage as soon as Tyrus stood up. He'd met the man 2 months ago and he couldn't remember seeing him angry. He was almost always cool, and even with everything he did, Byron wished he could find that within himself just now. He was unsure just how to approach an apology, or how to de-escalate from his poor decision.
I'm sorry. I didn't...
As he started to apologize, Byron recognized the different look on Tyrus's face. There wasn't anger, or an attacking, or even a defensive posture. The man's eyes were distant, and his hands were down loosely at his sides.
Are you okay?
He meant to speak further, but his brain cut him off and began carrying him toward Tyrus, distant and fully withdrawn. Byron reached his hand out, grabbing Tyrus by the arm, and just as he did, Tyrus shrugged off the grab and raked what Byron thought were claws right across his chest. Byron reacted as his body fell and engaged the pore in his mind to heal any wound that may have been dealt. Tyrus looked at his hand, now in the shape of a crow's foot with claws to match. The hand changed, and Byron suddenly saw terror in the man's eyes. Byron decided not to move and spoke with a soft tone just loud enough to carry, but not enough to startle or be sharp.
Tyrus, are you okay?
Still not moving, he watched for a change in his teacher.
What did I do?
It was my fault. I'm fine.
Tyrus walked slowly to the hearth that sat behind their table. It had a small fire in it. The step up to the hearth provided a seating place, and Byron watched as he sat down and buried his head in his hands. Tyrus was dark-skinned, nearly 6'6", and almost 300 pounds. In this moment, however, all those features which often set him apart made Byron pity him. Byron stood up with the same care with which he had spoken just moments before. No sudden moves, no loud steps. He closed the distance with Tyrus.
Is it all right if I sit down?
Tyrus nodded.
Can't believe this happened again.
What do you mean?
Byron sat down, still leery of a potential lash-out.
I lost control.
Well, you had help. It wasn't your fault.
5 years and nothing has changed.
What are you talking about?
Tyrus explained the unique circumstances of meeting Benjamin Hayne. He went on, and as he talked, Byron noticed Tyrus had relaxed.
We just needed lodging, and my people were desperate. We'd defended ourselves from attacks in the past. We were just nomads, moving to wherever resources were and setting up camp. We were weary. I didn't think...
Byron watched Tyrus as he fought with his memory.
I was the only one of my kind. I already stood out because of my size. So when the leaders came to me, I wasn't shocked. However, they wanted to slaughter the people there so we could take the place over.
Tyrus never turned his face from its forward stare. Byron watched it with careful observation to see if something could be gained. He'd always been able to read between the lines. His father called it a rare instinct, and that he needed to trust it. Tyrus's face was a pure reflection of his words. It spoke no secret as far as Byron could tell.
I sealed my own fate when I told them no. After that, they feared me. Now the leaders did anyway. And they came for me after I'd drank a bit. I was surprised I couldn't fight back.
Tyrus pulled the shirt from its tucked position around his waist. His gray gauntlets with a large T for Tyrus and K for Clade carved on them. Byron took in Tyrus's uniform as Tyrus removed the shirt. Byron's face sank as the guilt in the pit of his stomach became a deep void that pulled at his heart.
The leaders of my tribe tried to kill me. They almost succeeded. It started just like what happened here. They shoved a table into me, and before I could even decide whether to fight back, they sprang on me.
Oh my god.
Byron wasn't replying to Tyrus Clade's story. He was still staring at the deep grooves of healed-over white and pink scars covering the man's back. Partnered with the scars on his face, they painted a brutal picture of Tyrus's past. He never took his eyes off of this giant beside him.
And I just helped recreate it.
Even if he had wanted, Byron couldn't have hidden his guilt.
I think I was just tired. Thinking about the battle that's coming. I really don't think I can do this. I was barely alive when he found me and nursed me back to health. Actually coaxing me out of hiding. This, though. I've had these waking nightmares of people turning on me, coming for me. Ben kept telling me, "You'll be fine, it'll be okay." But I struggle with this so much.
Byron reached out a calming hand to the ones that were moving with agitation.
So that's why you're so flat.
What?
Byron was at ease now.
Your lack of reactions and your way of teaching. It's way different than I'm used to. It got under my skin a lot. I don't know why.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. It makes sense if you're trying to keep yourself in check. I'm the one who should be sorry, and I am. Sorry looking, but also sorry about my anger. It's a problem I work on.
Tyrus suddenly settled his eyes on Byron's hand over his own folded ones. Byron used the momentary pause to assemble his thoughts properly. Combing the conversation so far, he began to fit the profile together of the man in front of him.
What if this never changes? I don't think I can do this forever.
So what if it doesn't, Tyrus?
Tyrus now looked at him for the first time since sitting here, seeing a question in the young man's eyes rather than the challenge he initially felt.
You do the best you can. That's all anyone can ever expect. And look, it's not as though you've gone around slashing everyone's shirts. Only mine so far. And I deserved it.
Tyrus watched the face in front of him slowly turn warm as a smile came to it. He couldn't help but smile back.
When this happens again, you know I can take it. I will take it.
Byron felt Tyrus relax, and he withdrew his hand as he thought before speaking again, causing the silence to hang a bit too long.
I didn't mean to take this week out on you. I'm not doing well with much of my training. It kind of got dumped in your lap.
Kind of?
Tyrus pointed to the overturned table.
Okay, literally.
Byron paused and took in the scene fully, and then realized something.
I hope you'll still work with me.
Racked with guilt that washed over him like an intense wave, Byron stood. When there wasn't an immediate answer, Byron began to walk toward the door. He heard Tyrus fumble behind him, and then a short struggle Byron assumed was Tyrus putting on his shirt.
Would you like to get something to eat?
Sure.
Byron stopped and waited for Tyrus to appear beside him.
Hey, Tyrus. Have you ever tried meditation?
Asking the question as they both opened one of the double doors.
No. Never.
This is R.C. Anthus, and you're listening to Shepherd, Journey of the Time Walker.
The end of the day. Byron Hayne knew he was weird. He did this every day after the first week of training. He found his restless and anxious mind made sleep in silence virtually impossible. He found a strange solution that fixed it, though. He opened the door to the home of the fort's blacksmith. A folded blanket and a stuffed pillow in hand, he quietly stepped in and received an acknowledging nod from Mac. That's what they all called him. Byron slipped into the room easily and found a soft bed made of a canvas thrown over a pile of wool. Byron had come here weak into the stress of training, desperate to find a cure to the restless mind he had. He always found the sounds of wood or metal being worked to be just enough distraction to relax him. He thought he would seem crazy to Mac, but the man obliged his strange request to sleep here while he worked. At night, Mac worked less noisy jobs, like mending boots, stitching armor, repairing belts, or even polishing said armor and boots. Byron didn't know himself if the smith ever actually slept. Byron came in the evenings, and was woken in the early morning by Mac when he needed to close up to work outside with the weapons and metallurgy part of his job. Byron, sometimes refreshed from his sleep, would join him as he started his tasks. The man hardly spoke a word and worked non-stop. Byron tried to understand, but he couldn't relate very well. As he lay on the makeshift bed, Byron listened to the sounds of Mac's efforts as he moved around the room in between tasks. Behind the blackness of his eyelids, Byron absorbed the sounds and let his brain carry him off to sleep. A few hours later, the door opened quietly again. This time it was Benjamin who slipped inside. This didn't seem to disturb Mac either. A cup in his hand, Ben went to where Byron lay and set himself down beside his brother. "Hey!" Byron jerked awake at the sudden sharp whisper. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. It's just some water, buddy. You need some." Byron took a big drink with several gulps, but didn't quite empty the cup. Satisfied, Ben stood up and turned to make his way out of the small workshop. Instead, the door opened, and in walked Tyrus Clade, nearly as quietly as Ben had been when he came in earlier.
"Oh, you're here. Should have guessed."
Holding up his hand, Tyrus showed Ben his reason for coming.
"I bought a piece of cake."
"He's pretty out right now. Cake probably isn't the best idea."
"Probably not."
Ben directed Tyrus to step outside, and he followed close behind. Mac shook his head behind them. Ben and Tyrus leaned against the wall outside the small workshop, talking easier. "It's getting closer, Tyrus."
"It's pretty much on your face. How long do you think?"
"I'm not sure."
"You should tell him."
"I can't do that."
"He's stronger than you think."
"I don't want him to deal with that."
"I know you've said as much before. I didn't think you were wrong before today. I think you might regret it."
"Before today? What does that mean?" Tyrus told the entire story of his exchange with Byron earlier.
"You told me I was destined to follow him. So I spent these last couple of months trying to figure him out. I wanted to know why you saw that for me. All I saw was an impulsive child. I was angry on the inside because I'd spent 5 years preparing for a letdown."
"Before today?" Tyrus nodded.
"Before today."
Tyrus took a breath and tried to exhale the pang he felt in his chest.
"For 5 years you told me, this will pass. You'll get better. You won't always have this." I always hated that. Because somewhere deep down I knew you expected me to change, to wake up and magically be better. What if that never happens? What if I'm just broken? What if all I can do is survive? It's too much pressure when people just expect you to forget your entire tribe tried to murder you. Then he comes along, your brother, with 10 less years life experience and says, "Next time this happens, you know I can take it." Imagine that. He saw my fear and he soothed it. A kid who has no idea what it's been like. He actually soothed it. Like that first time when you found me in the desert.
Tyrus paused, more annoyed that he'd given a speech than anything. After feeling that the words had settled, he spoke for his own benefit more than Ben's.
"I'll follow that boy to the depths of the darkest places if he asks me to."
Ben placed a hand on the taller man's shoulder. "Good." Ben smiled to himself and took a few good steps away before turning back, his smile even wider. "And Tyrus, I didn't say this will pass as a way to make you feel like you needed to get better. Remember, my friend." Ben pointed to his eyes. "I can see the future." Ben left Tyrus in a confused, contemplative silence. He would get it eventually, Ben thought to himself, and when he did, Tyrus was going to hit him so hard.